Naima, bitter. You're parked illegally. The fine is $150. Julian, desperate. I won't drive away this time. Not after 8 years of regretting the biggest mistake of my life. Narrator, intense. This is the moment when a simple parking ticket reunites two lovers torn apart by wealth, power, and a father's ruthless manipulation. Naima, vulnerable. How can I trust you again when you disappeared without a word, leaving me to pick up the broken pieces of my heart? Julian, determined. I'll fight my father, the world, even fate itself to prove I never stopped loving you. When a billionaire's son chooses love over legacy, his powerful father will stop at nothing to tear them apart. Private photos leaked, careers threatened, lies exposed. But who will emerge victorious in this high-stakes battle of hearts? Can a love that survived 8 years of separation overcome the darkest forces of wealth and power? Before we begin this emotional journey, we'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. The summer heat in Manhattan was brutal as Naima Brooks adjusted her traffic enforcement uniform. At 28, she'd been working this job for 5 years now, and she'd developed a reputation among her colleagues for being tough but fair. No one, no matter how rich or important they claimed to be, could talk their way out of a ticket with Naima. Another day, another dollar, she muttered to herself as she clocked in at the precinct office. Her supervisor, Mike Daniels, a balding man in his 50s, looked up from his computer. Brooks, you're covering the Upper East Side today. Gallery openings tonight, so watch for those luxury cars trying to park wherever they please. Naima nodded. They can afford the finest cars, but not the parking garages, huh? Mike chuckled. That's why we need you out there. You don't let them get away with anything. It was true. While some of her colleagues might hesitate when confronted with wealth and status, Naima treated everyone the same. A violation was a violation, whether you drove a beat-up sedan or a car worth more than most people's houses. By mid-afternoon, Naima had already issued 15 tickets. The humidity made her dark curls stick to the back of her neck, and she was counting the hours until her shift ended. As she walked down Fifth Avenue, she spotted a sleek black Bentley parked in a clearly marked no parking zone outside the Whitman Gallery. Typical, she said under her breath, pulling out her ticket book. The car's windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see inside, but that didn't matter. Rules were rules. Naima began writing the ticket, meticulously noting the details of the violation. Just as she was about to place the ticket on the windshield, the driver's window rolled down. "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem?" That voice. Naima froze, her hand suspended in mid-air. It had been 8 years, but she would know that voice anywhere. Slowly, she turned to face the driver, and there he was. Julian Carrington. The years had been good to him. His face had matured, more angular now, with a neatly trimmed beard that hadn't been there in college. His eyes, though, those were exactly the same, dark brown with golden flecks that seemed to catch the light even on cloudy days. Julian's expression shifted from casual inquiry to shock as he recognized her. Then his lips curved into a smile, that same smile that had once made her heart skip beats. "Naima," he said, his voice soft with recognition. "Naima Brooks." The pen slipped from her fingers, clattering to the pavement. She felt her hand tremble as she bent to pick it up, grateful for the moment to compose herself. "You're parked illegally," she said flatly when she straightened, struggling to keep her voice professional. Julian's eyes never left her face. "Then, write it," he said, his voice low and intimate. "But I won't drive away this time." Naima felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. How dare he? After 8 years of silence, how dare he speak to her like nothing had changed? She finished writing the ticket with shaking hands and thrust it toward him. "That'll be $150. You can pay online or contest it in court." Julian took the ticket, his fingers brushing against hers. The brief contact sent an unwelcome jolt through her body. "You look good, Naima," he said. "Really good." "I'm working, Mr. Carrington," she replied coldly. "If you'll excuse me, I have more tickets to write." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone on the sidewalk could hear it. She didn't look back, though every cell in her body wanted to. That night, Naima couldn't sleep. Memories she'd worked hard to bury came flooding back, playing like a movie behind her closed eyelids. She'd been 19 when they met, a sophomore at Columbia on a full academic scholarship. Julian had been in her economics class, always sitting in the back row despite being one of the brightest students. While most people knew he was from a wealthy family, Julian never flaunted it. He drove a modest car, lived in an apartment off campus rather than in one of his family's properties, and wore simple clothes that didn't advertise their designer origins. They'd been paired for a semester-long project. At first, Naima had been wary. She'd worked too hard to get to Columbia to risk her GPA on a rich kid who might not pull his weight. But Julian had surprised her, showing up to every study session prepared and contributing thoughtful ideas. Their first kiss had happened 3 weeks into the project, while they were studying late at the library. He'd walked her back to her dorm, and as they stood outside in the gentle spring rain, he'd looked at her with such intensity that she'd felt seen in a way she never had before. "I can't stop thinking about you," he'd admitted. "I know we're supposed to be focusing on this project, but..." She'd been the one to close the distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss had been tentative at first, then deepened into something that made her forget they were standing in the rain outside her dorm, where anyone could see them. After that, they were inseparable. For almost 2 years, Julian had been the center of her world. They studied together, argued about politics and economics, and dreamed about their futures. When she told him she wanted to be a lawyer focusing on civil rights, he'd supported her completely. When he shared his ambitions to create tech that would help underserved communities, she'd believed in him. It wasn't always easy. Julian kept their relationship separate from his family life. He'd explained that his father, Richard Carrington, was controlling and judgmental, especially about Julian's choice of friends and romantic partners. "My father has very specific ideas about who I should be with," Julian had told her. "But I don't care what he thinks. This is about us, not him." Naima had accepted this, though sometimes it hurt to be kept secret. Julian assured her it was temporary, just until he was financially independent from his family. Then came that night in May, the end of their junior year. They'd made plans to spend the summer together in New York. Julian had rented an apartment in Brooklyn where they could stay while Naima did an internship at a legal non-profit, and Julian worked on his app development. She'd waited for him at the cafe where they were supposed to meet to sign the lease. 1 hour passed, then 2. Her calls went straight to voicemail. When she went to his apartment, his roommate said Julian had packed a bag and left without explanation. The next day, her phone pinged with a news alert. Carrington Air takes summer position at family company's Tokyo office. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. She'd tried to contact him for weeks, calling and emailing until she finally accepted the truth. Julian Carrington had walked out of her life without a backward glance. Naima woke up the next morning with gritty eyes and a headache. She'd finally fallen asleep around 4, only to be jolted awake by her alarm at 6. She made her coffee extra strong and tried to push thoughts of Julian out of her mind. "Just a coincidence," she told herself as she pinned her badge to her uniform. "New York is a big city, but people run into each other. That's all it was." Her phone rang, and she answered without checking the caller ID, assuming it was work. "Brooks here." "Naima, it's Julian." She nearly dropped the phone. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources," he said. "I needed to talk to you." "Well, I don't need to talk to you," she snapped. "Lose my number, Julian. Please just give me 5 minutes. In person, that's all I'm asking. Why, so you can disappear again with no explanation?" "No thanks." There was a pause. "I owe you an explanation. I know that. Let me give you one." Despite herself, Naima felt a flicker of curiosity. For years, she'd wondered what had happened, why he'd left so suddenly. The not knowing had been almost as painful as the abandonment. "Fine," she said finally. 5 minutes. There's a coffee shop on East 73rd and 1st. I have a break at noon. I'll be there, thank you, Naima." She hung up without responding, already regretting her decision. What was she thinking? Julian Carrington had broken her heart once. She'd be a fool to give him another chance to hurt her. But as much as she tried to talk herself out of it, at noon she found herself walking into the coffee shop. Julian was already there, sitting at a table in the back corner. He stood when he saw her, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "For you came," he said. "I said I would," she replied, sitting down. "Your 5 minutes started the moment I walked in, so talk fast." Julian took a deep breath. "First, I want to apologize. The way I left, with no explanation, no goodbye, it was unforgivable. You deserved better." "Yes, I did," Naima agreed, crossing her arms. "But that doesn't explain why you did it." Julian looked down at his hands. "My father found out about us. I don't know how. Maybe he had me followed. Maybe someone at school told him. But he knew everything." "So? You were an adult? Why should your father's opinion have mattered?" "It wasn't just his opinion. Julian said quietly. He threatened you. Naima blinked in surprise. Me? I never even met your father. He threatened to destroy your mother's career. The words hit Naima like a physical blow. Her mother, Dorothy Brooks, was a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital, a job she'd held for over 20 years. She'd raised Naima alone after her father died when Naima was 10, working double shifts to keep them afloat. What are you talking about? Naima demanded. My father has connections on the hospital board. He threatened to have your mother accused of medical negligence, something that would have ruined her career and reputation. He had manufactured evidence, Naima. He showed it to me. Naima felt sick. Why would he do that? Because you weren't part of his plan for me, Julian said bitterly. You weren't from the right background, didn't have the right connections. He wanted me with someone who could advance the Carrington business interests. So you just left, without telling me any of this. Julian ran a hand through his hair. I thought I was protecting you and your mother. My father made it clear that if I warned you, he'd go through with his plan regardless. I believed the only way to keep you both safe was to disappear completely. Naima stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. Part of her wanted to believe him. It would explain the abruptness of his departure, the complete silence afterward. But another part, the part that had spent years rebuilding her life after he shattered it, was skeptical. That's quite a story, she said finally. Very dramatic, but it's been 8 years, Julian. Why are you telling me this now? Because my father no longer has that power. I've built my own company, my own fortune. I'm not dependent on him anymore. Julian leaned forward. And because I never stopped thinking about you, Naima. Not for a single day. Naima stood up abruptly. Your 5 minutes are up. Thanks for the explanation, but it doesn't change anything. What happened between us was a long time ago. Julian stood too. I understand, but I'm not giving up, Naima. I made the mistake of walking away from you once. I won't do it again. That's not your choice to make, she said sharply. Goodbye, Julian. She turned and walked out of the coffee shop, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Only when she was half a block away did she allow herself to take a deep, shuddering breath. 8 years. 8 years of trying to forget him, of rebuilding her life piece by piece. She'd given up her dream of law school after Julian left, unable to focus on her studies through the haze of heartbreak. Instead, she'd finished her degree in criminal justice and joined the traffic enforcement division, finding satisfaction in a job where the rules were clear and consequences were immediate. And now Julian was back, claiming he'd left to protect her. It was too much to process, too overwhelming to face in the middle of a workday. She would think about it later, when she was home alone and could fall apart if she needed to. For the next week, Naima tried to go about her normal routine, but Julian seemed to be everywhere. She'd spot his car parked legally near her patrol route. Once she saw him sitting at an outdoor cafe, reading a newspaper as she walked by. He didn't approach her, didn't try to talk to her, but his presence was a constant reminder of their shared past. On Friday evening, Naima went to visit her mother. Dorothy Brooks lived in the same modest apartment in Harlem where Naima had grown up. Despite Naima's offers to help her move to a nicer place, Dorothy insisted she was happy where she was, surrounded by memories and longtime neighbors. You look tired, baby, Dorothy said as she served dinner. Everything okay at work? Naima hesitated. She hadn't told her mother about running into Julian. Dorothy had been there to pick up the pieces when he left, had watched her daughter struggle through depression and heartbreak. She'd never said, I told you so, even though she'd been wary of Julian from the start. I ran into someone from college, Naima said finally. Julian Carrington. Dorothy's hand stilled as she was serving the green beans. Julian? After all this time? Yeah. He's been trying to explain why he left the way he did, and what reason could he possibly have that would make up for how he hurt you. Naima looked at her mother, searching for any sign that what Julian had said might be true. Had Dorothy ever faced accusations at work, threats to her career that she'd kept from Naima? He said his father threatened to hurt your career if he didn't break things off with me, Naima said carefully. Did anything strange happen at the hospital around that time? Any complaints or issues? Dorothy frowned. Nothing I can recall, but that family has connections everywhere. It's possible something was brewing that I never knew about. She reached across the table to take Naima's hand. But that doesn't excuse him, honey. He could have found a way to warn you, to fight for you. That's what I said, Naima agreed. But you still have feelings for him, Dorothy finished gently. Naima sighed. I don't know what I feel. Angry, confused, curious. It's all mixed up. Just be careful, her mother advised. That boy broke your heart once. Don't give him the chance to do it again unless you're sure he's changed. Naima nodded, but she couldn't help wondering, had Julian changed, or was he still the same person who had walked away when things got difficult? The following Monday, Naima was patrolling near Central Park when a sleek black town car pulled up beside her. The back window rolled down, revealing Julian in a perfectly tailored suit. "Need a ride?" he asked. "I'm working," she replied, not breaking stride. "Your shift ends in 10 minutes. I checked the schedule." She stopped and turned to face him. "Are you stalking me now? Because that's not going to win you any points." Julian had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not stalking, just trying to find a way to talk to you again." "Why? You've explained why you left. What more is there to say?" "A lot, actually." He opened the car door. "Please, Naima, just a short ride. I have something to show you." Against her better judgment, Naima found herself getting into the car. 10 minutes, she said firmly. "That's all you get." The interior of the car was cool and smelled of expensive leather. As they pulled away from the curb, Naima noticed a manila folder on the seat between them. "What's that?" she asked. Julian picked up the folder and handed it to her. "Evidence of what my father planned to do to your mother." With hesitant fingers, Naima opened the folder. Inside were documents, what appeared to be patient complaints, internal memos from the hospital, even photos that had clearly been staged to suggest negligence. All of it centered around her mother, and all of it fabricated. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father keeps records of everything. When I left the family business and started my own company, I hired someone to hack into his private server. I needed leverage in case he ever tried to come after me or my company." Julian's face was grim. "I found these files there, along with evidence of dozens of other people he's threatened or blackmailed over the years." Naima looked through the documents, feeling sick. These would have destroyed her mother's career, her reputation, her life. "You could have fought this," she said finally. "Exposed what he was doing." "I was 21, Naima. Scared and stupid. I thought I was making the noble choice by disappearing." Julian's voice was heavy with regret. "It took me years to realize I should have trusted you with the truth, that we could have faced it together." Naima closed the folder, her mind racing. If what Julian was saying was true and the evidence in her hands suggested it was, then he hadn't abandoned her on a whim. He'd been trying, in his misguided way, to protect her family. "I don't know what you want from me, Julian," she said finally. "Yes, your father is clearly a monster. And yes, maybe you thought you were doing the right thing, but you still broke my heart. You still disappeared without a word for 8 years." "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking for forgiveness, not right away. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I am now and to get to know who you've become." The car slowed to a stop, and Naima realized they were outside her apartment building in Washington Heights. She hadn't told Julian where she lived. "How do you know where I live?" she asked, suspicion creeping back in. Julian looked sheepish. "I might have done some research before I approached you. I wanted to be prepared." "That's not creepy at all," she said sarcastically. But there wasn't much heat behind her words. She was too overwhelmed by everything she'd learned. "I'm staying at the Pierre," Julian said as she reached for the door handle. "If you want to talk more, about anything, just call. I'll be there." Naima stepped out of the car, the folder clutched in her hand. "I need time to think, Julian. This is a lot to process." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere this time." As the car pulled away, Naima stood on the sidewalk, feeling as though her carefully reconstructed life had just been turned upside down again. Julian Carrington was back, and despite everything, despite all the years and pain and anger, a small part of her was glad, and that scared her more than anything. Over the next few days, Naima threw herself into work, trying to keep her mind off Julian and the revelations he'd shared. But she couldn't stop thinking about the documents she'd seen, the evidence of how far Richard Carrington had been willing to go to separate them. On Thursday evening, she was just finishing her shift when she spotted a familiar black Bentley parked legally in a spot across from where she was standing. Julian was leaning against it, waiting. Something inside her softened at the sight of him. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and confusion, she felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. She crossed the street, stopping a few feet away from him. "Are you following me again?" "No," he said with a slight smile, "just hoping our paths might cross." Naima couldn't help but smile back. "That sounds like following. Call it what you want. I just wanted to see you." His expression grew serious. "Have you thought about what I told you? About what my father did?" "I've thought about nothing else," she admitted. "I even asked my mother if she remembered any problems at the hospital around that time. She didn't. But that doesn't mean your father wasn't planning something. Julian nodded. He's careful. He wouldn't have moved against her unless I forced his hand. Naima studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. But all she saw was the same earnestness that had drawn her to him in college, the same intensity in his eyes. "What do you want from me, Julian?" she asked again. "Really?" "Dinner," he said simply. "Just dinner. A chance to talk without time limits or the weight of the past hanging over us. Can you give me that much?" Naima hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But another part, a part she'd tried to silence for 8 years, wanted to say yes. "Just dinner," she agreed finally. "Nothing more." The smile that lit up Julian's face made her heart skip a beat, just like it used to. "I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow?" "Make it 8, she said. "And nothing fancy, I don't want to feel underdressed." "Casual it is," Julian promised. "Though you could never be underdressed, Naima. You're beautiful in anything." She rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "Save the charm for dinner. I'll see you tomorrow." As she walked away, Naima felt a mixture of anticipation and fear. She was stepping back into dangerous territory, opening herself up to a man who had once broken her so completely. But she also felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Maybe. Just maybe. Their story wasn't over after all. Soon the next evening, Naima stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear. Nothing fancy, Julian had promised, but what did that mean to someone whose casual wear probably cost more than her monthly rent? She finally settled on a simple blue dress that hugged her curves without being too revealing, paired with comfortable but stylish flats. She left her hair natural, a halo of tight curls framing her face, and applied minimal makeup, just enough to enhance her dark eyes and full lips. At precisely 8 o'clock, her doorbell rang. Julian stood on the other side, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking her in with undisguised appreciation. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, accepting the flowers. "Let me put these in water before we go." In the kitchen, she arranged the flowers in a vase, aware of Julian standing in her small living room, looking at the framed photos on her bookshelf. There was something surreal about having him in her space, this man who had once been the center of her world, and then a ghost for 8 long years. "Ready?" she asked, returning to the living room. Julian turned from examining a photo of Naima with her mother at her college graduation. "Your mother looks well," he said. "I'm glad." "She is," Naima confirmed. "She's thinking about retiring next year, but I'm not sure she will. She loves her job too much." They walked to the elevator in companionable silence. Outside, the black town car waited, but Julian gestured in the opposite direction. "I thought we'd walk, if that's okay. The restaurant is just a few blocks away." Naima nodded, surprised and pleased by the suggestion. As they walked side by side through the warm evening, she was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the faint scent of his cologne, the way he unconsciously matched his stride to hers. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "tell me about this company of yours. Last I heard, you were working for your father." Julian grimaced. "That lasted about 2 years, long enough for me to learn the business and save some capital. Then I struck out on my own." "Doing what?" "Tech development, but with a focus on educational tools for underserved communities." His face lit up as he talked about his work. "We create software that helps schools in low-income areas provide specialized education for students with learning differences at a fraction of what other programs cost." Naima couldn't help but be impressed. It was exactly the kind of work Julian had talked about wanting to do in college. "That's actually amazing," she admitted. "You're really making a difference." "I'm trying to," he said modestly. "What about you? I remember you wanted to be a civil rights attorney. How did you end up in traffic enforcement?" Naima tensed slightly. "Plans change," she said vaguely. "This job pays the bills." Julian looked like he wanted to press further, but they had arrived at the restaurant, a small, cozy Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. "I hope this is okay," he said. "I remembered how much you loved that little Italian restaurant near campus." "You remembered that?" Naima asked, touched despite herself. "I remember everything about you, Naima," Julian said softly. "Everything." The hostess led them to a corner table, secluded enough for privacy but not so isolated as to feel romantic. Julian held out Naima's chair for her, a gesture that reminded her of his innate courtesy. one of the things that had first attracted her to him. As they settled in and ordered drinks, a glass of red wine for her, sparkling water for him, Naima found herself relaxing. There was something comfortable about being with Julian again, a familiarity that transcended the years apart. "So, traffic enforcement," Julian said, picking up their earlier conversation. "How did that happen?" Naima took a sip of her wine before answering. "After you left, I had a hard time focusing on school. My grades slipped. By the time I got things back on track, law school seemed out of reach." Julian's face fell. "I'm so sorry, Naima. I never meant to derail your dreams." "It wasn't just you," she said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Life happened. My mother got sick for a while. Nothing serious, but it meant medical bills. I needed a stable job with benefits, not more student loans." "But you're not happy," Julian observed. "I can see it in your eyes when you talk about your work." Naima shrugged. "Not everyone gets their dream job, Julian. Some of us just do what needs to be done. What if you could go back to school now, finish what you started? At my age, with my responsibilities." Naima shook her head. "That ship has sailed." "It doesn't have to be," Julian insisted. "You're brilliant, Naima. You always were. The world needs lawyers like you would have been." "Maybe," she conceded. "But that's not how things worked out." Their food arrived, pasta for her, chicken parmesan for him, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Julian told stories about his travels, about the challenges of starting his own company. Naima shared anecdotes about particularly memorable tickets she'd issued, about her mother's book club that had somehow evolved into a wine-tasting group. By the time they finished dessert, tiramisu shared between them, Naima was surprised to realize hours had passed. Being with Julian was easy, comfortable in a way she hadn't expected. "Thank you for tonight," Julian said, as they walked slowly back toward her apartment. "For giving me a chance to explain, to start making amends." "I'm glad I came," Naima admitted. "It was good to talk, to clear the air." They reached her building too soon. Standing outside the entrance, Naima felt a flutter of nervousness, unsure how to end the evening. Julian solved the dilemma by taking her hand gently. "I'd like to see you again, Naima, if you're willing." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. Julian smiled, lifting her hand to his lips for a brief, gentle kiss. "Good night, Naima. I'll call you tomorrow." As she watched him walk away, Naima felt a strange mixture of emotions. Hope and fear, excitement and caution. Julian Carrington had walked back into her life as suddenly as he'd left it, and she wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. But for the first time in 8 years, she was willing to find out. Over the next few weeks, Naima found herself spending more and more time with Julian. Despite her initial reservations, she couldn't deny the connection that still existed between them. It was as if the 8 years apart had both changed everything and nothing at all. They fell into a comfortable routine. Julian would pick her up after her shift, and they would explore the city together, eating at small neighborhood restaurants, walking through parks, even attending a community theater production one rainy evening. He never took her to flashy, expensive places, seeming to understand that ostentatious displays of wealth would only create distance between them. "You're different," Naima observed one evening as they sat on a bench in Riverside Park, watching the sunset paint the Hudson River in shades of gold and pink. "More grounded," Julian smiled. 8 years of living with regret will do that to a person. Plus, building a business from scratch instead of inheriting one teaches you what really matters. "And what really matters?" she asked, curious about his answer. "People," he said simply. "Relationships, making a difference in the world. All the things money can't buy." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "All the things I lost when I walked away from you." Naima felt a flutter in her chest at his words. "You're making it very hard to stay angry with you." "Good," Julian replied with a grin. "That's the plan." But even as they grew closer, Naima kept a part of herself guarded. She enjoyed Julian's company, treasured the laughter and conversation they shared, but she couldn't fully open her heart to him. Not yet. The memory of how thoroughly he'd shattered her once before was still too vivid, too painful. Julian seemed to sense her hesitation. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never tried to rush their reconnection. He was patient, attentive, and more transparent than he'd been in college. He talked openly about his family, his work, his hopes for the future. And always, in everything he said, Naima could hear the unspoken message, "I won't leave you again." One Friday evening, Julian called Naima just as she was finishing her shift. "Are you free tomorrow?" he asked. "There's something I'd like to show you." "What kind of something?" Naima asked, curious. "It's a surprise, but it's important to me. I'd really like you to see it." Naima hesitated only briefly. "Okay, what time?" "I'll pick you up at 9 in the morning. Wear comfortable shoes. We'll be doing some walking." The next morning, Julian arrived exactly on time, as always. He drove them himself in a modest SUV rather than the flashy Bentley or town car with a driver. "Where are we going?" Naima asked as they crossed the George Washington Bridge, leaving Manhattan behind. "The Bronx," Julian replied. "Just a little further." 20 minutes later, he pulled up in front of a large brick building that looked like it might have once been a school or community center. A freshly painted sign over the entrance read, "Carrington Community Tech Center." "What is this place?" Naima asked as they got out of the car. Julian looked both proud and slightly nervous. "It's one of my company's community projects. Come on, I'll show you." Inside, the building had been completely renovated. The main floor was divided into several large open spaces filled with computers, tablets, and other technology. Though it was Saturday, the center was busy with people of all ages, children playing educational games on tablets, teenagers coding on laptops, adults in what looked like a digital literacy class. A tall woman with grey-streaked braids approached them, her face lighting up when she saw Julian. "Mr. Carrington, we weren't expecting you today." She turned to Naima with a warm smile. "And you must be Naima. I'm Evelyn Thomas, the center director." Naima shook her hand, surprised. "How you know who I am?" Evelyn laughed. "Of course. Julian talks about you all the time. He said he was hoping to bring you by soon." Julian looked slightly embarrassed. "Evelyn helped me set this place up 2 years ago. She's the heart and soul of the center." "He's being modest," Evelyn told Naima. "This place was his vision from the start. He picked this neighborhood specifically because of the high unemployment rate and limited access to technology." As Evelyn led them through the center, Naima was impressed by the range of programs offered: coding classes for kids, digital job skills training for adults, entrepreneurship workshops for teens, even special technology sessions for seniors. "We serve about 500 people a week," Evelyn explained proudly, "and we've helped over 200 adults find better jobs through our training programs." "That's amazing," Naima said sincerely, looking at Julian with new respect. This wasn't just charity or a tax write-off, this was meaningful work that was changing lives. After Evelyn excused herself to help with the class, Julian led Naima to a quiet corner of the building. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Because this is who I am now," he said. "This is what I've been trying to build. Not just financial success, but something that matters." He took her hand. "I wanted you to see that the dreams we talked about in college, about making a difference, about using privilege to create opportunity, I never gave up on those, even when I gave up on us." Naima felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Julian, there's more," he said, leading her down a hallway to a door marked Legal Aid Clinic. Inside was a small but well-appointed office space with several desks, legal reference books on shelves, and a conference room visible through a glass partition. "What is this?" Naima asked, confused. "Something new we're starting," Julian explained. "Free legal assistance for community members dealing with housing issues, employment discrimination, immigration problems, all the things that keep people trapped in cycles of poverty and struggle." Naima walked slowly around the space, running her fingers over the spines of the law books, peeking into the conference room with its polished table and comfortable chairs. "It's a good idea," she said finally. "But why show me specifically?" Julian took a deep breath. "Because I was hoping you might consider running it." Naima stared at him in shock. "What?" "Julian, I'm not a lawyer. I never went to law school, remember?" "But you could," he said earnestly. "That's what I'm trying to say. I want to give you a scholarship to any law school you choose. And when you graduate, this place will be waiting for you." Naima felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. "You want to pay for me to go to law school?" "Julian, that's crazy. That would cost—" "I don't care what it costs," Julian interrupted. "Money is the one thing I have plenty of. What I don't have is you, fulfilling the dream you had before I messed everything up." Naima shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't accept that. It's too much." "It's not charity," Julian insisted. "It's reparation for what I took from you when I left." His voice softened. "You don't have to answer now. Just think about it, please." Naima nodded mutely, her mind racing. Law school, the dream she'd abandoned years ago, suddenly within reach again. It was too much to process all at once. They spent another hour at the center, with Julian introducing her to staff and program participants. Everyone clearly adored him, and not in the way people typically fawned over the wealthy. They spoke to him with genuine affection and respect, like a friend rather than a benefactor. On the drive back to Manhattan, Naima was unusually quiet, trying to sort through her feelings. "I've overwhelmed you," Julian said apologetically. "I'm sorry. I wanted to show you that I'm serious about making things right." "It's a lot to take in," Naima admitted. "Going back to school at my age, starting over, I don't know if I can do it." "You can do anything, Naima. You're the strongest person I've ever known." Julian glanced at her. "But even if you say no to law school, I want you to know that seeing you again, being part of your life again, it's more than I hoped for. It's enough." Naima looked at his profile as he drove, noting the sincerity in his expression, and for the first time since he'd reappeared in her life, she allowed herself to truly believe that Julian Carrington might have changed, after all. A few days later, Naima decided to tell her mother about Julian's offer. They were having their weekly dinner at Dorothy's apartment, and Naima had been uncharacteristically distracted throughout the meal. "All right, out with it," Dorothy said finally, setting down her fork. "You've been a million miles away all evening. What's going on?" Naima took a deep breath. "Julian offered to pay for me to go to law school." Dorothy's eyebrows shot up. "Law school, after all these years. He's opened some kind of community legal aid center in the Bronx. He says he wants to make up for derailing my education when he left." "That's some offer," Dorothy said thoughtfully. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." Naima pushed her food around her plate. "It feels like too much, Mom. Like I'd be obligated to him forever." Dorothy reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "Baby, let me ask you something. If Julian hadn't come back into your life, would you still want to be a lawyer? Is that dream still in your heart?" Naima considered the question seriously. "Yes," she said finally. "I still think about it sometimes. What it would be like to really help people fight for their rights, to make a difference that way instead of just writing parking tickets. Then maybe you should consider his offer, not as some kind of payback, but as an opportunity to reclaim your own dream." Dorothy squeezed her hand. "You're only 28, Naima. That's not too old to start over." "But what about you? What about helping with your bills?" Dorothy waved dismissively. "I'm fine. My pension is good, and I've been saving. I don't want you putting your life on hold for me." "I just don't want to be indebted to him," Naima admitted. "What if things don't work out between us? What if he disappears again?" "Then get it in writing," Dorothy said practically. "Make it a formal scholarship with no strings attached. If he's sincere about wanting to make amends, he'll understand your caution." Naima nodded slowly. Her mother, as usual, had cut through all the confusion to the heart of the matter. "That makes sense. And Naima," Dorothy added, her expression serious, "I want you to be careful with your heart. Julian seems to be trying to make things right, and that's good. But don't rush back into loving him until you're sure he's worthy of it." "I won't," Naima promised. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was already too late. Despite all her efforts to keep her emotions in check, Julian was finding his way back into her heart, one thoughtful gesture at a time. The next day, Naima asked Julian to meet her at a coffee shop near her apartment. She'd thought carefully about what she wanted to say, rehearsing her words until they felt right. Julian arrived looking slightly nervous, as if he feared she was going to tell him to get lost for good. The uncertainty in his expression made him seem more human, more vulnerable than the confident billionaire the world knew. "I've been thinking about your offer," Naima said after they'd gotten their coffee and found a quiet table. "About law school." Julian nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I want to accept," she said, watching his face light up with hope. "But I have conditions." "Name them," he said immediately. "First, it needs to be a formal scholarship, not a personal gift. Something administered through your company or a foundation, with clear terms that aren't dependent on whatever is happening between us." Julian nodded. "That makes sense. I can have the paperwork drawn up this week. Second, I need to apply and get accepted on my own merits. No strings pulled, no donations to influence the admissions committee. If I do this, I need to know I earned it." "Absolutely," Julian agreed, "though for what it's worth, I have no doubt you'll get in wherever you apply." "And third," Naima said, her voice softening slightly, "I need time. Time to prepare for the LSAT, time to apply to schools, and time to figure out what's happening with us. No pressure, no expectations, just time." Julian reached across the table to take her hand. "Naima, you can have all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed her fingers gently. "And thank you for giving me a chance to make this right, for giving us a chance." Naima felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she had a clear path forward, a chance to reclaim the dream she'd thought was lost forever. And she had Julian to thank for it. As if reading her thoughts, Julian said, "This isn't me trying to buy your forgiveness or your affection, Naima. This is me trying to restore what should have been yours all along." "I know," she said softly. And she did know. Whatever else might happen between them, Julian's offer was genuine, born of regret and hope rather than manipulation. Over the next few weeks, Julian helped Naima research law schools and LSAT prep courses. He never overstepped, never tried to make decisions for her, simply offering support and resources when she asked for them. True to his word, he had his company establish a formal scholarship fund for promising individuals pursuing careers in public interest law, with Naima as the first recipient. Naima gave notice at her traffic enforcement job, planning to focus full-time on LSAT preparation. Her colleagues were surprised but supportive, especially when she explained her plans to become a lawyer. "Always knew you were too smart for this job," Mike, her supervisor, said gruffly when she turned in her resignation. "You'll make one hell of an attorney, Brooks." As her last day approached, Naima felt a mix of excitement and anxiety about the changes ahead. Julian had become a constant presence in her life, a source of encouragement and stability as she prepared to take this leap. They still hadn't defined their relationship, but the connection between them grew stronger each day. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Naima was walking home from the library, where she'd been studying for the LSAT, when a sleek silver Rolls-Royce pulled up beside her. The back window lowered, revealing an older man with steel-grey hair and Julian's eyes, but none of his warmth. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice cultured and cold, "I believe it's time we had a conversation. Please, get in." Naima stared at him, instantly recognizing Richard Carrington from news photos and the unmistakable family resemblance. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," she said firmly. "I think we do," Richard replied, "about my son and the mistake he's making with you." Again, Naima felt a flash of anger. "Mr. Carrington, no offense, but I'm not interested in anything you have to say, not even if it concerns Julian's future, the future of his company." Richard's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile but looked more like a threat. "5 minutes, Ms. Brooks. That's all I ask." Against her better judgment, Naima got into the car. The interior was luxurious but cold like its owner. Richard Carrington sat across from her, examining her with clinical detachment. "My son seems quite taken with you," he said. "Again, I had hoped he'd outgrown this infatuation." "What do you want, Mr. Carrington?" Naima asked bluntly. "I want what's best for my son, for the Carrington legacy." He leaned forward slightly. "Julian has built something impressive with his company. I didn't think he had it in him, to be honest, but now he's at a crucial juncture, a potential merger that could triple the company's value and influence, a merger that depends on his focus and reputation remaining unblemished." "And you think I'm a blemish?" Naima asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Not you personally, Ms. Brooks, but this scholarship, this very public display of whatever this is between you two, it raises questions that could jeopardize the merger. That's ridiculous. Julian helping someone go to law school has nothing to do with his business deals." Richard smiled thinly. "Perhaps not in a rational world, but business isn't always rational. The company he's merging with is very traditional, very concerned with image. The heir to the Carrington fortune publicly funding the education of a woman he once abandoned, a woman from a very different background, it creates a narrative that makes them uncomfortable." Naima felt sick. It was like being transported back 8 years, hearing about another threat designed to separate her from Julian. Only this time, the threat was being delivered directly. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she demanded. "Simply to step back, decline the scholarship, give Julian space to complete this merger. It means everything to him, whether he realizes it or not." Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. "Of course, I understand this would be a sacrifice on your part. I'm prepared to compensate you." He held out the check. Naima didn't take it, but she could see the amount, $1 million. "You're trying to buy me off," she said, disgust evident in her voice. "I prefer to think of it as a business transaction," Richard replied coolly. "Everyone gets what they want. Julian gets his merger. You get your law school funding. just without the complications of being tied to my son. Naima stared at him, seeing in his cold, calculating eyes everything Julian had fled from, everything he'd tried to build his life in opposition to. "Mr. Carrington," she said quietly, "you don't know me at all if you think I would take your money. Don't be naive, Ms. Brooks. $1 million is a life-changing sum. So is having self-respect." Naima reached for the door handle. "This conversation is over." Richard's voice hardened. "If you care about Julian at all, you'll reconsider. This merger isn't just about money. It's about expanding his technology to help more communities, more children. Isn't that what you both claim to care about? Making a difference?" The words hit Naima like a physical blow. Was it possible that Richard was telling the truth? That her presence in Julian's life could actually harm the work he was doing? "I'll think about what you've said," she conceded, stepping out of the car. "But not about your money. Keep your check, Mr. Carrington." As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, Naima stood in the rain, feeling the weight of history repeating itself. 8 years ago, Richard Carrington had separated them with threats against her family. Now he was back, using Julian's own success as leverage. The question was, what would she do about it this time? Naima spent a restless night, turning Richard Carrington's words over in her mind. She couldn't dismiss the possibility that he was telling the truth about the merger, about how her connection to Julian might be perceived by conservative business partners. But she also couldn't forget how easily he had lied and manipulated in the past. By morning, she knew what she had to do. She called Julian. "Can we meet? It's important." They arranged to meet at a small park near her apartment. Julian arrived looking concerned, clearly sensing something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked as soon as he saw her face. "Did something happen?" "Your father happened," Naima said bluntly. "He found me yesterday, offered me $1 million to disappear from your life." Julian's face darkened with anger. "He did what?" "He said my connection to you could jeopardize some big merger your company is working on, something about the other company being very traditional and not liking the narrative of you funding my education." Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I'm going to kill him, I swear. This time he's gone too far." "Is it true?" Naima asked quietly. "About the merger?" Julian hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, we're in talks with Westfield Tech. They have an incredible educational platform that would help us expand our programs nationwide. But my father has no right to interfere, and he certainly has no right to approach you." "He offered me a check for $1 million, Naima said. "Said I could still go to law school just without the complication of being connected to you." Julian looked stricken. "Naima, you have to believe me. I had no idea he would do this. I never told him about the scholarship or about us reconnecting." "I believe you," she assured him. "But Julian, if this merger is as important as he says, for the work you're doing—" "Don't," Julian interrupted sharply. "Don't even suggest that we should let him win again. Nothing, no business deal, no amount of money is worth losing you a second time." The conviction in his voice made Naima's heart swell. This was different from 8 years ago. Julian wasn't a scared college student anymore. He was a man who knew his own mind and was willing to fight for what mattered to him. "So what do we do?" she asked. Julian took her hands in his. "We do exactly what we were planning to do. You go to law school. I run my company, and my father can either accept that or stay the hell out of my life." Naima squeezed his hands. "He'll fight dirty, Julian. You know that." "Let him try," Julian said grimly. "I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago. I won't be manipulated by him anymore." His expression softened as he looked at her. "And I won't lose you again, Naima. Not for anything." Naima felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling that she'd built around her heart. Julian had chosen her over his father's threats once again, but this time he was doing it openly, defiantly. This wasn't the secretive relationship of their college days. This was Julian declaring to the world that she mattered to him. "We should talk to your business partners," she suggested. "Get ahead of whatever your father might do or say. Be transparent about our history and the scholarship." Julian nodded. "That's smart. We can control the narrative that way." He smiled suddenly. "See? You're already thinking like a lawyer." Naima couldn't help but smile back. "I've always been good at strategy." "One of the many things I love about you," Julian said, then froze as he realized what he'd said. Love. The word hung in the air between them, unexpected and overwhelming. "Julian," Naima began, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Not yet. I know you're not ready to hear it." He took a deep breath. "But it's true. I never stopped loving you, Naima. Not for a single day in 8 years. Naima felt tears gathering in her eyes. She wasn't ready to say the words back to him, not yet. But for the first time, she could imagine a future where she might be. "We'll face your father together," she said instead. "Whatever he throws at us, we'll handle it. Together." Julian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Together," he agreed. "That's all I've ever wanted." As they sat in the park, making plans to counter Richard Carrington's interference, Naima felt a sense of peace and rightness that had been missing from her life for a long time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Richard wouldn't give up without a fight. But this time they would face the challenges side by side. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. The confrontation with Richard Carrington came sooner than either of them expected. The very next day, Julian received a call from his assistant, panic evident in her voice. "Mr. Carrington, you need to see this right away. It's all over the business news sites." Julian pulled up the link she sent and felt his blood run cold. The headline read, "Tech billionaire Julian Carrington's secret past. College girlfriend resurfaces for massive payout." The article included photos of Julian and Naima together recently, along with a grainy photo from their college days that Julian didn't even know existed. The text painted a damning picture. Julian had supposedly abandoned Naima when she became inconvenient to his rise in the business world, and now she was back, leveraging their past relationship for financial gain in the form of a personal scholarship worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anonymous sources, clearly his father, claimed that Julian's judgment was compromised by guilt and that the scholarship was just the beginning of what Naima was demanding. Julian called Naima immediately. "Have you seen it?" he asked as soon as she answered. "I just got a call from 3 different co-workers," she confirmed, her voice tight with anger. "It's bad, Julian." "It's my father," Julian said grimly. "This has his fingerprints all over it." "What do we do?" Naima asked. "This makes me look like a gold digger and you look like I don't even know what." "We fight back," Julian said firmly. "My PR team is already working on a statement, but I think we need to do more than that. We need to go on the offensive." "What do you have in mind?" "A press conference, the truth, all of it. My father's threats 8 years ago, his attempt to buy you off yesterday, everything." Julian's voice hardened. "I'm done letting him control the narrative. It's time the world saw Richard Carrington for who he really is." Naima hesitated. "Julian, that's your father. Are you sure you want to go public with all of this?" "He stopped being a father to me the moment he threatened your mother's career," Julian said flatly. "He's a bully who uses his money and influence to control people. It's time someone stood up to him." "This could affect your business, the merger," Naima reminded him. "I don't care. Some things are more important than business deals." Julian's voice softened. "You're more important, Naima. Us. Whatever this is between us, it matters more than any merger." Naima felt her heart swell with emotion. This was the man she'd fallen in love with in college. Passionate, principled, willing to fight for what he believed in. Only now, that man had the resources and confidence to actually win the fight. "Okay," she agreed. "Let's do it. But I want to be there too. If we're telling our story, we should tell it together." "Are you sure? This will put you in the spotlight in a major way." "I'm sure," Naima said firmly. "I ran away from your father's threats once before by giving up on us. I won't make that mistake again." Julian's voice was thick with emotion when he replied, "I'll have my team set it up for tomorrow. And Naima, thank you for believing in me, in us. We're in this together now," she reminded him. "Whatever happens." As she hung up the phone, Naima felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were about to take on one of the most powerful men in New York, a man who had spent decades accumulating influence and destroying enemies. It was terrifying. But for the first time in 8 years, Naima felt completely alive. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock the next day at the headquarters of Julian's company. By noon, the story had grown even bigger, with speculation running wild in the business press and on social media. Would the scandal tank the pending merger? Was Julian Carrington having some kind of breakdown? Was Naima Brooks a calculating gold digger or an innocent victim? Naima arrived at Julian's office an hour early, her stomach in knots. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple but elegant navy blue dress that projected professionalism rather than wealth. She wanted to look like herself, not like someone trying to fit into Julian's world. Julian met her in the lobby, his face drawn with stress, but his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. Have you heard from your father? Julian's expression darkened. He called this morning, threatened to disown me if I went through with this press conference. As if that's supposed to scare me at this point. And the merger. Westfield is understandably concerned about the publicity, but they haven't pulled out yet. They're waiting to see how we handle this. Julian shrugged. But honestly, if they can't accept the truth, then maybe they're not the right partners for us anyway. Julian's assistant appeared, looking harried. Mr. Carrington, we're ready whenever you are. The press room is full, and the live stream is set up. Julian took Naima's hand. Last chance to back out, he said softly. I wouldn't blame you if you did. Naima squeezed his hand. Not a chance. Let's do this. The press room was packed with reporters and cameras. As Julian and Naima walked in together, a barrage of camera flashes went off. Julian led Naima to a small podium where 2 microphones had been set up. Thank you all for coming, Julian began, his voice steady. I've called this press conference to address the stories that have been circulating about myself and Naima Brooks. He gestured to Naima beside him. Rather than respond to rumors and anonymous sources, we wanted to tell you the truth directly. He went on to explain their history, how they'd met in college, fallen in love and planned a future together, how his father had threatened Naima's mother's career if Julian didn't end the relationship, how he'd made the painful choice to disappear from Naima's life rather than risk her family's well-being. It was the biggest mistake of my life, Julian said, emotion evident in his voice. But I was young and scared, and under my father's influence in a way I'm not anymore. Naima stepped forward to the microphone. I didn't know why Julian left 8 years ago, she said, her voice clear and strong despite her nerves. I only learned the truth recently, when we reconnected by chance. She explained how Julian had shown her the evidence of his father's plans to discredit her mother, how he had established a scholarship to help her pursue the law career she'd abandoned after their breakup. This scholarship isn't about guilt or payoff, she said firmly. It's about righting a wrong and helping me reclaim a dream that was derailed, and it's been established as a formal program that will help others pursue careers in public interest law after me. Julian took over again, explaining Richard's attempt to buy Naima off and the subsequent planting of the defamatory story when she refused. My father has spent decades using his money and influence to control the people around him, Julian said, his voice hardening. I regret that I once allowed that control to cost me the most important relationship in my life. I won't make that mistake again. He looked directly into the cameras. To my father, Richard Carrington, your tactics won't work this time. I'm not a scared college student anymore, and Naima is not someone who can be threatened or bought off. If you want a public battle, you've got one. The questions from reporters came fast and furious after that. Julian and Naima answered them honestly, without rehearsed talking points or evasions. When asked about the nature of their current relationship, Julian simply said, "We're figuring that out day by day. But whatever happens between us, it will be our choice this time, not anyone else's." By the time they left the podium, Naima felt drained, but strangely liberated. The truth was out there now, for better or worse. They had nothing left to hide. Julian's PR director met them in a private room after the press conference, looking cautiously optimistic. Initial reaction is mostly positive, she reported. People love a good second-chance romance story, and taking on a powerful father figure plays well. The scholarship angle helps too. It gives everything a purpose beyond just personal drama. And Westfield, Julian asked. Their CEO just called. He wants to meet with both of you tomorrow. Julian raised his eyebrows. Both of us? The PR director nodded. Specifically requested that Ms. Brooks attend as well. I think that's a good sign. After she left, Julian turned to Naima with a weary smile. Well, we did it. We laid it all out there. How do you feel? Naima asked. Exhausted, relieved. Julian took her hands in his. Proud of us. Naima smiled. Me too. Julian's phone buzzed with a text. He checked it and his expression hardened. It's from my father. Just one word. War. Naima squeezed his hands. Let him try. We're stronger together. Julian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Yes, we are, he murmured against her hair. Yes, we are. As Naima rested her head against Julian's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, she knew they had crossed a threshold. Whatever happened next, with Richard, with the merger, with their relationship, they would face it united, and somehow that made even Richard Carrington's threats seem less frightening. The next morning, Naima woke to the sound of her phone ringing. It was her mother. Have you seen the newspaper? Dorothy asked without preamble. No, I just woke up. Naima replied, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why? You and Julian are on the front page of the Times, Dorothy said, and every news website I've checked. The press conference you did yesterday is everywhere. Naima sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Is it bad? Actually, it's mostly positive. Dorothy sounded surprised. They're calling it a modern Romeo and Juliet story, and painting Julian's father as the villain, which, from what you've told me, seems about right. Naima let out a relieved breath. We were worried about how it would play out. Julian risked a lot by going public. Well, it seems to be working in your favor. People love a good romance, especially when there's a powerful enemy trying to keep the couple apart. Dorothy paused. How are you holding up, baby? This is a lot of attention all at once. I'm okay, Naima said, surprised to find it was true. It's strange to have my personal life out there for everyone to see, but it also feels freeing, I guess. No more secrets, no more hiding. And Julian, is he being good to you? Naima smiled, thinking of how Julian had insisted on seeing her safely home after the press conference, how he'd held her hand and promised that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Yes, Mum, he's being very good to me. Well, just remember what I said before. Take your time. Make sure he's earned your trust back before you give him your heart again. I will, Naima promised. We're meeting with the CEO of the company Julian wants to merge with today. That should tell us a lot about where things stand. After hanging up, Naima checked her own phone and was overwhelmed by the number of notifications. News alerts, text messages from friends and former colleagues, even emails from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know about her and Julian, about the dramatic story they'd shared with the world. Her text from Julian stood out among the rest. Car will pick you up at 10 for the Westfield meeting. I'll be waiting at the office. Try not to read the news until after. Better to focus on what's ahead than what's behind us. Naima smiled at his thoughtfulness. Julian always seemed to anticipate what she needed. She texted back a simple, "See you soon," and got up to prepare for the day. The Westfield meeting was scheduled for 11 at Julian's company headquarters. As promised, a car was waiting for Naima at 10, and it delivered her to the gleaming glass tower in Midtown, where Julian had built his business empire. Julian was waiting in the lobby, looking sharp in a navy suit, but with tension evident in the set of his shoulders. His face brightened when he saw her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, kissing her cheek in greeting. "Better than I expected," Naima admitted. "My mother called to tell me we're front-page news." Julian grimaced. "I'm sorry about that. I knew there would be publicity, but I didn't expect quite this level of interest." "It's okay," Naima assured him. "It's actually kind of nice to have the truth out there after all these years." They took the elevator to the top floor, where Julian's assistant was waiting to escort them to the conference room. Through the glass walls, Naima could see a silver-haired man in an expensive suit standing at the window, looking out over the city. "So that's Edward Westfield," Julian murmured. "Old money, old values, but supposedly a decent guy at heart. His son runs most of the company now, but Edward still has final say on major decisions like mergers." Naima smoothed her simple black dress, suddenly nervous. "And he specifically asked for me to be here?" "Yes," Julian confirmed. "I'm not sure what that means, but we'll find out." Julian's assistant opened the conference room door. "Mr. Westfield, Mr. Carrington, and Ms. Brooks are here." Edward Westfield turned from the window, his face impassive as he studied them. He was in his 60s with the weathered look of someone who'd spent a lifetime making tough decisions. "Julian," he said, stepping forward to shake Julian's hand. "And Miss Brooks, thank you both for coming." They sat at the polished conference table, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air until Westfield finally spoke. "I'll be direct," he said. "Yesterday's press conference caused quite a stir. Our board is concerned about the publicity and about getting dragged into what appears to be a family feud." Julian nodded. "I understand those concerns, Mr. Westfield, but I want to assure you that my personal life won't affect the quality of my company's work or the potential success of our merger." Westfield studied Julian for a moment. "Your father called me last night." Julian tensed visibly. "Did he?" "Yes. He had quite a lot to say about you and about Ms. Brooks." Westfield turned his gaze to Naima. "He painted a very different picture than what I saw in your press conference." "I'm sure he did," Naima said quietly. "He also hinted that he has evidence that would expose the truth about your relationship, something about financial improprieties related to this scholarship you've established." Westfield's eyes were sharp as he watched their reactions. Julian's face hardened. "There are no improprieties. The scholarship is completely legitimate and transparently administered through a non-profit foundation. My father is desperate and will say anything to drive a wedge between us. Westfield nodded slowly. That was my assessment as well. I've known Richard Carrington for 30 years. He's brilliant in business but ruthless in his personal life. I've seen him destroy people who got in his way. Naima felt a chill at his words. What more might Richard do to separate them? Mr. Westfield, she said, finding her voice. I understand your concerns about the merger. Julian has worked too hard building his company to have it damaged by his personal life. If my presence is a problem— Actually, Ms. Brooks, Westfield interrupted. Your presence is precisely why I wanted this meeting. Julian and Naima exchanged confused glances. I'm not sure I understand, Julian said. Westfield leaned back in his chair. 25 years ago, I fell in love with my secretary. In those days, that sort of thing was even more frowned upon in business circles than it is now. My father, who ran Westfield at the time, threatened to disown me if I pursued the relationship. Julian's eyebrows rose in surprise. What did you do? I chose love, Westfield said simply. I married her anyway. My father cut me off for 5 years. It was the hardest period of my life professionally, but the best personally. His face softened slightly. Marion and I have been married for 24 years now. Best decision I ever made. Naima felt a spark of hope. So you understand? I understand exactly what you're going through, Westfield confirmed. And I respect a man who stands up for what he believes in, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult, he turned to Julian. The merger is still on the table, with one condition. Name it, Julian said eagerly. The condition is that you remain true to yourself, Westfield said. I won't do business with a man who can be manipulated or bullied, even by his own father. The Julian Carrington I saw at that press conference yesterday, passionate, principled, willing to fight for what matters, that's the man I want to partner with. Julian looked stunned. Thank you, Mr. Westfield. That means more than you know. Don't thank me yet, Westfield warned. Your father won't take this lying down. He'll come after you harder now. Try to prove that he still has power over you. You need to be prepared for that. We are, Julian assured him, reaching for Naima's hand. Together, Westfield stood, signaling the end of the meeting. My son will be in touch about the technical details of the merger. I look forward to working with you, Julian. He nodded to Naima. Both of you. After Westfield left, Julian turned to Naima with a look of amazed relief. I can't believe that just happened. I know, Naima agreed. I was so sure he was going to pull out of the deal. Instead, he basically gave us his blessing. Julian laughed incredulously. My father is going to be livid when he finds out. Naima squeezed his hand. Are you ready for whatever he might do next? Julian's expression sobered. Honestly? No, but we'll handle it. One day at a time. They didn't have to wait long for Richard Carrington's next move. That very evening, as Julian and Naima were having dinner at her apartment, Julian's phone rang with a call from his company's legal department. Mr. Carrington, his lawyer said, sounding strained, we've just received notice of a lawsuit filed by your father. He's suing you for defamation based on the statements made in yesterday's press conference. Julian closed his eyes briefly. On what grounds? He claims that you fabricated the story about his threats to Ms. Brooks' mother 8 years ago, and that you've damaged his reputation with false allegations. That's absurd, Julian said flatly. I have evidence of what he did. Nevertheless, he's filed the suit, and he's asking for $50 million in damages. After Julian hung up, he explained the situation to Naima, who looked horrified. $50 million? Can he really do that? He can file the lawsuit, Julian said grimly. Whether he can win is another matter. But even if he loses, he knows this will be a public, messy battle that will drag both of us through the mud. This is my fault, Naima said, distress evident in her voice. If I hadn't come back into your life— Don't, Julian interrupted sharply. This is not your fault, it's my father's. He's been doing this sort of thing my entire life, using his money and power to control everyone around him. The only difference now is that I'm finally standing up to him. Naima reached across the table to take his hand. What do we do now? We fight, Julian said simply. We gather every piece of evidence we have about his threats and manipulations, both 8 years ago and now, and we countersue if necessary. I should talk to my mother, Naima said thoughtfully. She might remember something from that time that could help us. Any unusual incidents at the hospital? Any complaints that appeared and then mysteriously disappeared? Julian nodded. That's a good idea. and I'll have my legal team start pulling together everything we have on my father's past behavior. He's made enemies over the years who might be willing to testify about his tactics. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, turning what should have been a quiet dinner into a strategy session. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Naima found herself marveling at how naturally they worked together, how their different perspectives and skills complemented each other. By the time Julian left around midnight, they had the beginnings of a plan to counter Richard's lawsuit. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Naima truly believed they could win. The next morning, Naima went to visit her mother, hoping to find some evidence that might help their case against Richard. Dorothy was already waiting with coffee and a grim expression when Naima arrived. "I saw the news about the lawsuit," Dorothy said as Naima sat down at the kitchen table. "That man is a piece of work." "That's one way to put it," Naima agreed. "Mom, I need to ask you some questions about that time, 8 years ago, when Julian disappeared. Did anything unusual happen at the hospital around then? Any complaints or problems that seemed odd?" Dorothy frowned, thinking. "Nothing major that I can recall, but there was one strange incident. A patient filed a complaint against me, claiming I had administered the wrong medication. It was completely false. I triple-check everything, you know that. The complaint was investigated and dismissed within a few days." Naima felt a chill. "When exactly was this?" "Let me think. It would have been May, right around the time you and Julian broke up. I didn't tell you about it because you were already so upset, and it was resolved quickly." "Did you keep any documentation of the complaint or the investigation?" Dorothy nodded. "I keep records of everything related to my work. It should be in the file cabinet in my bedroom." "Why? Do you think it's connected to Julian's father?" "It might be," Naima said, her mind racing. "Julian showed me evidence that his father had manufactured complaints against you as part of his threat. This could be the beginning of what he planned to do." They found the file, containing the original complaint, the investigation report, and the letter clearing Dorothy of any wrongdoing. The complaint had been filed by a patient named James Wilson, who had been admitted for routine surgery. "I don't even remember this patient," Dorothy said, frowning at the name. "Oh, which is odd because I usually remember everyone I care for." "Maybe he didn't exist," Naima suggested. "Maybe Richard Carrington created a fake patient to file a fake complaint." "That's disturbing," Dorothy said. "To think someone would go to those lengths just to keep you and Julian apart." Naima took photos of all the documents with her phone. "This could help us prove that Richard really did threaten your career. May I take these to show Julian?" Dorothy handed her the file. "Take them, and tell Julian I said it's about time someone stood up to that bully." When Naima showed Julian the documents, his face darkened with anger. "This is exactly how he operates," he said, examining the complaint. "Create a small problem first, then escalate if the target doesn't comply. He must have backed off when I left school and cut ties with you, so he never followed through with the bigger threats. Can we use this against him?" Naima asked. "Absolutely. We'll have my investigators look into this James Wilson, prove he was a fabrication." Julian looked up at her, his expression softening. "Thank you for finding this, Naima, and please thank your mother for keeping such good records." Over the next few days, Julian's legal team worked tirelessly to build their defense against Richard's lawsuit. They discovered that James Wilson had no records beyond the hospital complaint, no address, no social security number, nothing. It was as if he had appeared for the sole purpose of filing a complaint against Dorothy Brooks, and then vanished. Meanwhile, Richard escalated his attacks. He gave interviews to sympathetic journalists, painting Julian as unstable and manipulated by Naima, whom he portrayed as a calculating gold digger. He released selective emails and text messages from Julian's college days, taken out of context to make it seem like Julian had never been serious about Naima. The pressure was intense. Reporters camped outside Naima's apartment building, shouting questions whenever she came or went. Julian's company received daily calls from investors concerned about the negative publicity. Even Dorothy was approached at the hospital by journalists looking for dirt. Through it all, Julian and Naima stood firm. They declined to engage in a public war of words with Richard, focusing instead on preparing their legal case and moving forward with their lives. Julian threw himself into finalizing the merger with Westfield, while Naima studied for the LSAT and began the law school application process. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, their relationship deepened. What had begun as a tentative reconnection grew into something stronger, more resilient. The shared battle against Richard had forced them to trust each other completely, to be honest about their fears and hopes, to lean on each other's strengths. One evening, about 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, Julian took Naima to dinner at the small Italian restaurant they'd visited on their first date after reconnecting. "I have news," he said once they were seated. "My legal team found something big." Naima leaned forward eagerly. "What is it?" "Evidence that my father has done this before, threatened people with manufactured scandals to get his way." Julian's eyes were bright with vindication. "One of his former business partners came forward. Apparently my father threatened to expose an affair that never happened unless the partner agreed to sell his shares at a fraction of their value." "That's huge," Naima said. "Will he testify?" "He's willing to give a deposition," Julian confirmed, "and he thinks others might come forward once they see he has. My father has made a lot of enemies over the years. So we might actually win this," Naima said, hope rising in her chest. "We might do more than win," Julian said. "We might finally expose him for who he really is, end his ability to manipulate and threaten people." They toasted to that possibility, the tension of the past weeks easing slightly for the first time. As they ate, their conversation shifted to lighter topics: Naima's LSAT preparation, Julian's plans for expanding the community tech center, a movie they both wanted to see. It felt normal, almost domestic, and Naima realized with a start how comfortable she had become with Julian back in her life. The wall she'd built around her heart had crumbled bit by bit until she could no longer deny the truth. She was falling in love with him all over again. As they walked back to her apartment after dinner, Julian seemed unusually quiet, lost in thought. "Everything okay?" Naima asked, squeezing his hand. Julian stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through." Naima felt a flutter of nervousness. "That sounds serious." "It is," Julian admitted. "Naima, these past weeks have been the hardest of my life in many ways. The lawsuit, the publicity, the stress, it's been a lot." "I know," she said softly. "For me too. But they've also been the best weeks," Julian continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because you've been by my side through all of it. Because every day I get to see you, talk to you, be with you, and I've realized something that I think I've always known. From the moment I met you in that economics class 10 years ago." He took both her hands in his. "I love you, Naima Brooks. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day in 8 years. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost." Naima felt tears welling in her eyes. The words she'd been holding back, afraid to trust, afraid to believe, finally spilled out. "I love you too, Julian. I tried so hard not to, but I do. I always have." Julian's face lit up with joy. He pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. Naima melted into him, all the fears and doubts of the past dissolving in the certainty of this moment, this feeling. When they finally pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Move in with me," he said softly. "I know it's soon, but I don't want to waste any more time. I want to fall asleep next to you every night and wake up with you every morning." Naima hesitated. As much as she loved Julian, as right as this felt, part of her was still cautious. "What about your father? The lawsuit? All the chaos?" "We'll face it together," Julian said simply, "like we've been doing. But at the end of each day, we'll come home to each other. That's what matters most." Naima thought about it, about what it would mean to fully commit to a life with Julian, challenges and all, and she realized that despite everything, despite all the pain and complications, there was nowhere else she would rather be than by his side. "Yes," she said, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, I'll move in with you." Julian kissed her again, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm. Naima laughed against his lips, a sound of pure joy that she hadn't made in longer than she could remember. For this moment at least, everything was perfect. The perfection lasted exactly 3 days. Naima had just finished packing the last of her belongings for the move to Julian's penthouse when her phone rang. It was Julian, and from the tension in his voice, she knew immediately that something was wrong. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "No, I've been packing all morning. What's happened?" "My father's played his trump card," Julian said grimly. "He's released photos of us from college." Naima felt a chill of dread. What kind of photos? Private ones? Intimate? Julian's voice was tight with controlled fury. "They're all over the tabloids and social media." Naima sank onto her bed, feeling sick. "How did he get them?" "I don't know. I never shared them with anyone. He must have had someone hack my old accounts or devices." Julian sounded anguished. "Naima, I am so sorry. With shaking hands, Naima opened her laptop and did a quick search. The photos appeared immediately. Pictures she'd forgotten existed, taken during their college relationship. Nothing explicit, but private moments never meant for public consumption. Naima asleep in Julian's bed, wearing only his shirt. The two of them kissing in what was clearly his apartment. Naima looking at the camera with an expression of such naked love and trust that seeing it now, knowing what had happened afterward, was painful. "Oh my God," she whispered, closing the laptop. "I'm coming over," Julian said immediately. "We'll figure this out." "No," Naima said, struggling to think clearly through the shock and humiliation. "No, I need some time to process this. Naima, please, don't shut me out. Not now." "I'm not shutting you out," she assured him, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "I just need a few hours. Please, Julian, just give me a little time." After they hung up, Naima sat motionless on her bed, trying to come to terms with what had happened. Her private moments, her most vulnerable self exposed to the world as a weapon in Richard Carrington's vendetta. It was a violation so profound she could barely comprehend it. Her phone kept ringing, Julian calling back, her mother, friends who had seen the photos. She ignored them all, needing space to think, to decide what to do next, because this changed everything. If Richard was willing to go this far, to violate her privacy so completely, what else might he do? How much more painful and public could this fight become? And was it worth it? Was any relationship worth this kind of exposure, this kind of pain? As the afternoon wore on, Naima's shock gave way to anger, then to a grim sort of determination. Richard Carrington had tried to humiliate her, to make her retreat in shame. He wanted her to run away from Julian, to decide that the relationship wasn't worth the fight. She thought of the press conference, of standing beside Julian as they told their truth to the world. She thought of the quiet evenings they'd spent planning their defense against Richard's lawsuit, of Julian's unwavering support as she studied for the LSAT. She thought of his face when he told her he loved her, the absolute certainty in his voice. And she knew that Richard Carrington had made a serious miscalculation. He thought these photos would drive her away from Julian. Instead, they had done the opposite. They had reminded her of what they once had, of the pure, uncomplicated love they'd shared before Richard's interference, and they had strengthened her resolve to fight for that love, to not let Richard take it from them a second time. Naima picked up her phone and called Julian. "I'm coming over," she said when he answered. "And I'm bringing my boxes. We're still moving in together." The relief in Julian's voice was palpable. "Are you sure? After what he did?" "I'm sure," Naima said firmly. "Your father thinks he can shame me into leaving you. He doesn't understand that all he's done is remind me of how much we have to fight for." "I love you," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I can possibly say." "I love you too," Naima replied. "And Julian, it's time to end this. No more defense, no more reaction. It's time to take the fight to your father." "What do you have in mind?" Naima smiled grimly. "I'll tell you when I get there, but trust me, Richard Carrington is about to learn that he messed with the wrong woman." As she hung up and went back to packing, Naima felt a strange sense of clarity and purpose. Richard had tried to use her past to shame her, to control her. But he had underestimated her strength, her resilience, and most of all her love for Julian. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Naima believed that they might not just survive it, they might actually win. Julian was waiting at the door when Naima arrived at his penthouse that evening. His face was drawn with worry and anger, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You're really here," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "I told you I would be," Naima replied, setting down the box she was carrying. "Your father doesn't get to decide what happens between us. Not anymore." Julian pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry about the photos. I never thought he would stoop so low." "It's not your fault," Naima said against his shoulder, "but it does show how desperate he is. He's playing his dirtiest cards now, which means he's running out of options." Julian stepped back to look at her. "You said on the phone that you had a plan, to take the fight to my father." Naima nodded, a determined gleam in her eye. "I've been thinking about this all wrong. We've been playing defense, responding to your father's attacks, trying to protect ourselves. But that gives him all the power. It's time to change the game. What do you have in mind?" "We need to hit him where it really hurts," Naima said. "His reputation, his legacy, the things he cares about most." Julian's brow furrowed. "But that's what we tried to do with the press conference exposing his threats." "That was just the beginning," Naima explained. Your father has built his entire identity around being a brilliant businessman, a titan of industry. What if we could show that his success is built on lies and manipulation? What if we could prove that he's not just personally corrupt, but professionally corrupt as well? Julian's eyes widened as he caught her meaning. You want to investigate his business practices? Exactly, Naima confirmed. You said yourself that he's made a lot of enemies over the years, people he's threatened, blackmailed, or forced out of deals. What if we found them, got them to tell their stories, created a complete picture of who Richard Carrington really is? Julian was quiet for a moment, considering. It could work, he said slowly, but it would take time, resources. We have both, Naima pointed out. Your legal team is already finding people he's threatened. We just need to expand the search, look deeper. And what about the photos? The public humiliation he's trying to inflict on you? Naima straightened her shoulders. I refuse to be ashamed. Those photos show two people in love. There's nothing shameful about that. Her voice hardened. And if your father wants to play dirty, he should remember that I have nothing left to lose. He's already tried to destroy my reputation. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Julian looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern. You're incredible, you know that? But this won't be easy. My father has powerful friends, connections everywhere. So do you, Naima reminded him. And unlike your father, you've earned people's loyalty through respect, not fear. That matters. Julian nodded, determination replacing the worry in his eyes. Okay, let's do this. Where do we start? Naima smiled grimly. We start by calling in every favor, every contact, every resource we have. Your father has spent decades building his empire. It's time we took a very close look at the foundation it's built on. They worked late into the night, making lists of potential allies and sources of information. Julian contacted former business associates of his father's, people who had mysteriously sold their shares or stepped away from partnerships over the years. Naima reached out to a journalist friend who specialized in corporate investigations, explaining what they were looking for. By morning, they had the beginnings of a plan. Julian's legal team would expand their search for victims of Richard's threats and manipulation. The journalist would start digging into Richard's past business deals, looking for patterns of suspicious behavior. And Julian would leverage his connections in the tech world to analyze financial records, searching for irregularities that might indicate fraud or other illegal activities. This could take weeks, Julian warned, as they finally went to bed around dawn. Maybe months. We have time, Naima said, curling against his side. And in the meantime, we live our lives. I study for the LSAT. You finalize your merger. We don't let him stop us from moving forward. Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I decided to give you a second chance, she teased, her eyes already closing with exhaustion. Julian chuckled, pulling her closer. Best decision you ever made. As they drifted off to sleep, Naima felt a sense of peace despite the storm raging around them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, and that made all the difference. The next few weeks settled into a strange new normal. Naima moved the rest of her things into Julian's penthouse, carving out a space for herself in his sleek, modern home. She turned one of the spare bedrooms into a study area where she could prepare for the LSAT, surrounding herself with practice tests and study guides. Julian threw himself into finalizing the merger with Westfield, working long hours, but always making time for Naima in the evenings. They would eat dinner together, sometimes cooking themselves, sometimes ordering in, and share the progress of their respective days. And in the background, always, was their secret investigation into Richard Carrington's business empire. Every few days brought new information. A former employee willing to talk about questionable accounting practices, a business rival with stories of suspicious coincidences that benefited Richard, financial records that showed patterns just outside the boundaries of legality. The lawsuit Richard had filed against Julian was proceeding slowly through the courts, with hearings and depositions scheduled for the coming months. Richard continued his public relations campaign against them, giving interviews painting Julian as ungrateful and unstable, and Naima as a gold digger who had manipulated her way back into his son's life. But strangely, the more Richard attacked, the less power his words seemed to have. The initial shock of the leaked photos had faded, replaced by public sympathy for Naima and Julian. Richard's aggressive tactics were backfiring, making him appear vindictive and cruel rather than concerned. One evening, about a month after Naima had moved in, she returned from a practice LSAT session to find Julian waiting with a bottle of champagne and a broad smile. What are we celebrating? She asked, setting down her bag. Two things, Julian replied, popping the cork. First, the Westfield merger is officially complete. As of this afternoon, our companies are one. That's wonderful, Naima exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. She knew how much the merger meant for Julian's plans to expand his educational technology nationwide. And second, Julian continued, his smile growing even wider, we've found something big about my father. Naima's pulse quickened. What is it? Julian handed her a glass of champagne. A pattern of shell companies and offshore accounts, used to hide money from failed investments. It looks like my father has been falsifying financial reports to his board and shareholders for years, covering up losses and inflating profits. That's securities fraud, Naima said, her legal studies immediately kicking in. If you can prove it, he could face criminal charges. We're close to proving it, Julian confirmed. My team is following the money trail now, but what we already have is enough to take to his board of directors, enough to force him out of his own company. Naima sat down slowly, processing the implications. This could ruin him. Yes, Julian agreed, his expression sobering. It could, and part of me feels guilty about that. He is my father, after all. But Naima, he's hurt so many people, used his power to threaten and manipulate. Someone needs to stop him. And that someone has to be you, Naima said softly, understanding. His son. Julian nodded, sitting beside her. If it were just about us, maybe I could let it go. Find another way to deal with him. But it's not just about us anymore. It's about all the people he's harmed over the years, all the people he might harm in the future if someone doesn't stand up to him. Naima took his hand. Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. All the way. Julian squeezed her hand gratefully. I want to talk to him first. Give him a chance to step down quietly, to avoid public humiliation. He is still my father. I think that's fair, Naima agreed. When will you do it? Tomorrow, Julian said decisively. I've arranged a meeting at his office, just the two of us. Do you want me to come with you? Naima offered. Not to the meeting itself, but to be there afterward? Julian smiled at her. Always. But this is something I need to do alone. It's been a long time coming. Naima understood. This wasn't just about Richard's attacks on their relationship. It was about Julian finally breaking free from his father's influence and control. It was a reckoning years in the making. Just promise me one thing, she said, cupping his face gently. Remember that whatever happens with your father, you are not him. You never have been. Julian's eyes softened with emotion. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? It's a gift, Naima said lightly, though her eyes remained serious. I believe in you, Julian. I believe in the man you've become. Julian pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I love you, he whispered. More than I ever thought possible. I love you too, Naima replied, holding him tightly. Now and always. The next day, Naima tried to focus on her studies while Julian met with his father, but her mind kept wandering to what might be happening in Richard Carrington's office. Would Richard listen to reason? Would he step down quietly to avoid scandal, or would he fight back as he had every step of the way? When her phone finally rang in the late afternoon, she answered it immediately. Julian, how did it go? There was a pause, and then Julian's voice came through, sounding tired but relieved. It's over, Naima. He's agreed to resign. Really? Naima couldn't hide her surprise. Just like that? Not exactly, Julian admitted. At first, he denied everything. Called me ungrateful, threatened to disinherit me. The usual tactics. But when I showed him what we'd found, the evidence of the offshore accounts and the falsified reports, he knew he was cornered. So what happens now? He'll announce his retirement next week, citing health concerns. The board will name a successor, probably his CFO, who's been covering for him for years but isn't directly implicated in the fraud. And my father will quietly disappear to one of his homes abroad. Naima felt a weight lift from her shoulders. And the lawsuit against you? Dropped, Julian confirmed. Along with any further attacks on you or us. That was my non-negotiable condition. In exchange, we don't go public with what we found. That seems fair, Naima said carefully. But Julian, what he did, the threats, the photos, everything, there should be consequences. There are, Julian assured her. He's losing the thing he cares about most, his power, his position. He'll still be wealthy, still be comfortable, but he'll never again have the influence he once did. For my father, that's a fate worse than prison. Naima considered this. If you're satisfied with that outcome, then I am too. I am, Julian said firmly. It's time to move forward, Naima, to focus on our future, not the past. Where are you now? She asked. Just leaving his office. I thought I might stop by the community center on my way home, check in on the legal aid clinic's progress. Want to meet me there? I'd like that, Naima said, already reaching for her coat. I'll see you soon. As she headed out, Naima marveled at how much had changed in just a few months. Julian had stood up to his father, reclaimed his independence, and in the process had become even more the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. And she had found a strength in herself she hadn't known she possessed, a willingness to fight for what mattered instead of simply accepting what life handed her. Together they had faced down one of the most powerful men in New York and emerged victorious. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to build something new without the shadow of Richard Carrington looming over them. The community center was busy when Naima arrived, filled with the usual mix of children at computers, adults in training programs, and seniors learning digital skills. She found Julian in the legal aid clinic space, which was now fully furnished and staffed by 2 paralegals and a part-time attorney. He was deep in conversation with Evelyn, the center director, but his face lit up when he saw Naima. There she is, he said warmly, crossing the room to greet her with a kiss. The future director of this clinic. Naima rolled her eyes. Let me get through law school first, okay? Evelyn smiled at their exchange. Speaking of which, how's the LSAT prep going? Julian says you're taking the test next month. It's going well, Naima replied. I'm scoring in the upper percentiles on the practice tests. If all goes as planned, I'll be applying to schools for the fall semester. She's being modest, Julian interjected. Her last practice score was in the 99th percentile. She's going to have her pick of law schools. Naima felt a flush of pride at his words. After years of setting aside her dreams, it felt surreal to be pursuing them again, and with such support. After Evelyn excused herself to handle an issue in the main center, Julian led Naima on a tour of the latest additions to the legal aid space, a small law library, private consultation rooms, and a larger conference area for community education workshops. It's really coming together, Naima observed, running her hand along the polished conference table. You've created something special here, Julian. We've created it, he corrected gently. Your input has shaped everything about this space, and someday, when you're ready, it will be yours to lead. Naima smiled, touched by his unwavering faith in her. One step at a time, law school first. Julian nodded, but there was something in his expression, a barely contained excitement, that made Naima curious. What is it? She asked. You look like you're about to burst with something. Julian grinned. I have a surprise for you. I was going to wait until we got home, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. Open it. Puzzled, Naima opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. It was from Columbia Law School addressed to her. Her eyes widened as she read the first few lines. Julian, what is this? How did you... I didn't do anything except ask about their early admissions process, Julian explained quickly. The application and all the materials were yours. The essay you wrote, your LSAT practice scores, the recommendations from your professors at Columbia who still remember you. This is all you, Naima. Naima read the letter again, hardly daring to believe it. They're offering me early admission for next fall. Contingent on my official LSAT score, of course, but she looked up at Julian, tears in her eyes. I'm going to law school, to Columbia. Julian's smile was radiant. Yes, you are. You're reclaiming your dream, Naima, and I couldn't be prouder. Naima threw her arms around him, the letter still clutched in her hand. Thank you for believing in me, for pushing me to try again. You did all the hard work, Julian said, holding her tight. I just cheered from the sidelines. As they stood there in the space that represented both their values and their future, Naima felt a sense of rightness, of coming full circle. 8 years ago, her dreams had been derailed by circumstances beyond her control. Now, with Julian by her side, she was back on track, stronger and more determined than ever. Let's go home, she said softly. I think this calls for a celebration. Julian kissed her temple. I couldn't agree more. That evening, after dinner at home, Julian and Naima sat on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city lights. The fall air was crisp but not cold, and Julian had wrapped a soft blanket around their shoulders as they sipped wine and talked about the day's events. So it's really over, Naima mused. Your father's lawsuit, his attacks, all of it. It seems that way, Julian agreed, though I'll believe it completely when I see his retirement announcement next week. Do you think he'll honor the agreement? Stay away from us? Julian considered the question. I do, actually. Not because he's had a change of heart, but because he knows we have the power to destroy him completely if he doesn't. My father respects power, if nothing else. Naima nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. It's strange to think about moving forward without that cloud hanging over us, planning a future without constantly looking over our shoulders. A future, Julian repeated softly. I like the sound of that. He shifted slightly, turning to face her. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about our future lately. Something in his tone made Naima's heart beat faster. Oh? Julian took her hands in his. These past few months have been the hardest and also the best of my life. Hard because of everything we've faced, but the best because facing it with you has shown me what truly matters. He took a deep breath. I lost you once, Naima, because I wasn't brave enough to fight for what we had. I won't make that mistake again. To Naima's surprise, Julian slid from the lounge chair to one knee, still holding her hands. Julian, she breathed, realization dawning. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Naima Brooks, I have loved you since the moment you argued with me in that economics class 10 years ago. I've loved you through separation and reunion, through conflict and peace. I want to love you for the rest of our lives. He opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. Will you marry me? Naima looked from the ring to Julian's face, seeing in his eyes the same love and certainty she felt in her heart. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just a bone-deep knowledge that this was right. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes, Julian, I'll marry you. Julian's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the city lights like stars. I was so nervous, he admitted, rising to sit beside her again. I wasn't sure if it was too soon after everything. Naima cupped his face in her hands. It's been 10 years, Julian. I think we've waited long enough. He laughed at that, pulling her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I was thinking a spring wedding, he murmured, after your first year of law school. Something small, intimate, just the people who matter most. That sounds perfect, Naima agreed. And I want it to be at the community center. That place represents everything we believe in, everything we're building together. Julian nodded, clearly moved by the suggestion. I love that idea. And I love you, future Mrs. Carrington. Or is it future Ms. Brooks, attorney at law? Naima smiled. Maybe Brooks Carrington, the best of both worlds. As they sat together under the night sky, planning their wedding and their future, Naima marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From college sweethearts torn apart by manipulation and fear, to reuniting by chance when she wrote him a parking ticket, to fighting side by side against the forces that had once separated them. It had been a long and winding road. But now, with Julian's ring on her finger and his love surrounding her, Naima knew they had finally arrived exactly where they were meant to be, together. 1 year later, the community center buzzed with activity as guests arrived for the grand opening of the Brooks Carrington Legal Aid Clinic. The space had been transformed from the simple office Naima had first seen a year ago into a comprehensive resource center for the community, with a staff of 5 attorneys and 10 paralegals ready to provide free legal assistance to those in need. Naima stood near the entrance, greeting guests and accepting congratulations. She had just completed her first year at Columbia Law School, finishing at the top of her class, despite the demanding schedule. The clinic would be a perfect place to gain practical experience during her remaining years of school. There's my brilliant daughter, Dorothy Brooks said, approaching with a proud smile. She had retired from nursing 6 months ago and now volunteered at the center, teaching health education classes to seniors. This place is amazing, Naima. You and Julian have created something special here. Thanks, Mum, Naima said, hugging her mother. We couldn't have done it without your support. Dorothy waved off the praise. All I did was believe in you two. You did all the hard work. Speaking of Julian, Naima said, looking around, have you seen my husband? He was supposed to be here by now for the ribbon cutting. The word husband still felt new and wonderful on her tongue. They had been married for just 3 months, in a small ceremony right here at the center, surrounded by friends, family, and community members who had become like family. He called a few minutes ago, Dorothy informed her. Said he was running late but would be here soon, something about a surprise. Naima raised an eyebrow. Another surprise? That man and his surprises. As if summoned by her words, Julian appeared at the entrance, slightly out of breath as if he'd been rushing. He looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, his face lighting up when he spotted Naima. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing her cheek. "Had to pick something up." Naima narrowed her eyes playfully. "What are you up to now?" Instead of answering, Julian turned toward the door and waved someone in. To Naima's surprise, Edward Westfield entered, followed by a small group of people in business attire. "Mr. Westfield," Naima greeted him, confused but polite. "I didn't realize you were coming today." "Julian invited me," Westfield explained with a smile. "Said there was something important happening here that I shouldn't miss." Julian took Naima's hand, leading her to the center of the room where a small podium had been set up for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The guests gathered around, falling quiet as Julian stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming today to celebrate the opening of the Brooks Carrington Legal Aid Clinic," he began. "This project represents everything Naima and I believe in, using our resources and privileges to create opportunity for others." He gestured to Naima to join him at the podium. "Many of you know our story, how we were separated for 8 years by circumstances beyond our control, and how a simple parking ticket brought us back together." This earned a chuckle from the crowd. "What you may not know is that during those 8 years apart, Naima gave up her dream of becoming a lawyer. Now she's reclaiming that dream and helping others in the process." Julian turned to Edward Westfield. "Mr. Westfield and I have been discussing ways to expand the impact of this clinic to help more people in more communities. And today, I'm thrilled to announce that the Westfield Carrington Foundation is establishing a nationwide network of legal aid clinics based on this model, with a focus on helping communities of color and other underserved populations." Gasps and applause erupted from the crowd. Naima stared at Julian in shock. "The foundation will fund 50 clinics across the country over the next 5 years, Julian continued, "and I'm even more thrilled to announce that Naima Brooks Carrington will serve as the executive director of this initiative after she completes law school and passes the bar." Naima felt tears spring to her eyes as the room erupted in cheers. This was beyond anything she had imagined, a chance to make a real, lasting difference on a national scale. Julian turned to her, his eyes full of love and pride. "Surprise," he said softly, for her ears only. "Is it okay? I didn't want to commit you to anything without your agreement, but I wanted it to be a surprise for today." "It's more than okay," Naima managed, her voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect. You're perfect." As they cut the ribbon together, officially opening the clinic, Naima looked around at the space they had created, at the people who had supported them along the way, and at the man by her side who had never stopped believing in her, even when they were apart. From a traffic ticket to a national foundation, from college sweethearts to partners in every sense of the word, their journey had been unexpected and sometimes difficult, but standing here now, Naima wouldn't change a single step of it. As if reading her thoughts, Julian squeezed her hand. "Happy?" he asked softly. Naima smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "More than I ever thought possible." And it was true. The life they were building together, a life of purpose, passion and love, was beyond anything she had dared to dream during those long years apart. Julian had come back into her life like a whirlwind, challenging her to reclaim her dreams and her heart. And in doing so, he had helped her create a life richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined. As they moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing their vision for the foundation, Naima caught sight of the framed parking ticket on the wall of the clinic's entrance, the first ticket she had written to Julian upon their reunion, now displayed as a reminder of where their second chance had begun. Beneath it, Julian had added a small plaque with the words they had chosen for their wedding vows. "Some rules are meant to be broken, some loves are meant to come back." Naima smiled at the simple truth of those words. Their love had indeed come back, stronger and deeper than before, and together, they were creating a legacy that would help others break through the rules and barriers that held them back, just as they had done themselves. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was something better. It was real, hard-won, and built on a foundation of truth and mutual respect. It was a love that had survived separation, fought through obstacles, and emerged victorious. And as Julian pulled her close for a kiss, heedless of the cameras and guests around them, Naima knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of their story. The best chapters were still to come. The end.